Hello, my friends at Chovei Tzion and beyond. I want to address you today about Yom Hashoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is this evening, and it is being commemorated around the world. And though there is some debate within the halachic world as to whether we should have a separate day in the calendar dedicated to the Shoah, to the Holocaust, or if that day was Tisha B'Av, as Rav Soloveitchik Zal and other poskim felt. I think in a year like this, it's certainly appropriate, beyond any doubt, to take a moment and pause and reflect upon the magnitude of the loss that was incurred during those terrible years, those tragic years of the Holocaust. The loss of 6 million and more, 1 million of them being children, means so much to us when you consider what the loss of a life in our world, in our ranks, these days to the coronavirus, when we understand how precious every life is. I want to speak specifically about the loss of the children and why I think the loss of children is so incredibly tragic. I'll dedicate my words in memory of the million or 1.5 million or so children who were slaughtered during the years of the Holocaust by our enemies, Yimach Shemam v'Zichram. Particularly, I want to make mention of 2 children during the Holocaust who survived, who passed away during this current pandemic of the coronavirus, whose children go to our Kehillah. One is Mrs. Reggie Richman, Alei L'Shalom Rivka Bat Shlomo, who was the mother of Larry Richman, who is currently sitting Shiva for his dear mother. She was one of the hidden children who was able to survive the war in France, and really a remarkable story of having to live those years in hiding due to the graciousness of a wonderful woman in France, and was later able to be reunited with her parents. And Rabbi Binyamin Walmark, Binyamin Tzvi Walmark, whose son is currently sitting Shiva for him. He lived in his final years in Muncie, and his son Asher Walmark, who attends our Kehillah. He was one of the youngest during the war to go over to Japan and to be rescued and to study in the Mir Yeshiva in Shanghai, where it relocated. He spent 5 years there. He had his bar mitzvah one of the first weeks upon entering the Mir in Shanghai. And after the war, he went and studied in a number of places, including under Rav Yitzchak Hutner Zatzal, under whom he received smicha. Remarkable stories of 2 children during the years of the war, and they were the lucky ones. So many children were not so zocha. And why is it that the assault on children is particularly pernicious, particularly terrible? I'm reminded of the Gemara. There's a Gemara that describes the years of the Charban Bayis, the destruction of the temple. And the Gemara describes that the keys of the temple were handed over to the young children, the Pirchei Kahuna, who in a final last-ditch effort as the sanctuary was burning, they tossed the keys up into the air, and the hand of the Ribbono Shel Olam came down and Kiviyachol grabbed the keys away as if the sanctuary were locked. What this Gemara always describes to me, what always suggests to me, is that the final ones to hold the keys to our sanctuary, the last ounce of hope, is handed over to children. That even when adults give up, and yes, children are frightened easily, but even when adults give up, their children are still optimistic. They're still longing, they're still dreaming about a possibility. It's the adults who come in and tell them with cynicism and with negativity because they're jaded by the darkness of their experiences, by the harshness of their lives, perhaps the circumstances that they've confronted, that it's not worth dreaming anymore. It's not worth hoping. Children are the final frontier. They're the ones who hold on to hope when everybody else has long forgotten. When the Gemara describes the final stages of the Charban Bayis, the destruction of our temple is happening the moment children tossed their keys up into the air. That is to say, that when children, when their hopes, when their dreams are vanquished, that's the final stage. That is what seals our fate into a period of darkness. The assault against children committed by the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, is an assault that is particularly sadistic because it is cynical. It denies the notion of a future. It denies that there is a tomorrow. It suggests that there is no hope. Our worst enemies, Paro and Hitler and many in between, first assaulted children. They suggested that if you want to extinguish the flames of Judaism, the flames of Torah, you have to attack Torah study and you have to attack small children. That's the design of our enemies, because they say that if you want there to be no Jewish future, or no future for that matter, you need to attack those who are still longing, who still hold out for hope. And it is the loss of children, is the loss of innocence of those children that we mourn more than anything when we mourn the 6 million. I was once told a story by a Rebbe in Israel with whom I was able to learn for quite some time while studying in my years in Yeshivat HaKotel. And his brother was a Rebbe there for many years. The brother, Rabbi Ali Ehrman, whose dozens of shiurim, hundreds of thousands of shiurim can be found online, is a big Talmid Chacham. His brother, Rabbi David Ehrman, with whom I was able to study, was a big star back in the day in his years in Yeshiva University on the basketball team. He still holds many records to this day. And he tells about a story of his life, a tumultuous part in which he sort of went back and forth from practicing Judaism and a rebellious stage in which he left the faith for quite some time. And there was a team in Israel that he played for. And at some point during his rebellious years, he and the team who were living on a kibbutz had visited Yad Vashem. They visited the Holocaust museum in Israel, the famous Holocaust museum, and there's a hall that is dedicated to the remembrance of the children who perished during the Holocaust. And he describes, Rabbi Ehrman, David Ehrman describes how he was disconnected from his past. He was disconnected from the tragedy that he was trying to take in and experience. And he walked into this hall. In the hall, those who have been there know that there's one candle that reflects a million times over through a series of mirrors that are set up elaborately. And you walk through this thin corridor, but you take in the enormity of the loss, the gravity of the loss of 1 million. When you see one candle reflected that many times over, you understand that every life that was snuffed out is really the extinguishing of thousands, hundreds and thousands and millions of neshamos that could have come from that neshama. And as you reflect on this one candle that reflects over and over again, you get to listen to a track of names of children who were not so fortunate, names of children who were killed, who were martyred during the Holocaust. And as he's walking by, he hears the name of one such child who bears the exact same name as him. He's walking and he hears the name David Ehrman. And this shook him to his core, caused him to reflect upon his own life, the connection that he shared with that one candle, with that one child. And this was the beginning of his path back to tshuva, his path back to Judaism, and eventually becoming a pious and learned Jew to accomplish great things in Torah. When we reflect upon that child, we reflect upon a child, what we are doing is we are thinking about the loss of hope. But for Rabbi Ehrman, he understood that though that particular child's hope was extinguished, he still had potential. And today, Holocaust Remembrance Day, let us think about the potential that is not lost, because the Jewish people are still alive, because we did survive despite the loss of the millions, despite the fact that our ranks and our families and our lives would look dramatically different if it weren't for the Holocaust. We are still in this world. Hope remains alive. There is a future. There is a potential. There is optimism. Now more than ever, during this crisis, during this pandemic, people need to hear a message of hope. They need to hear that there is potential, that there is a future. In particular, we have to turn to our children and we have to tell them that. I'll just share one final story. I was talking with my father. He should continue to have a refuah shalema, who has spent well over a week in the hospital suffering with this illness. And now, Baruch Hashem, it looks like he's on his road to recovery, and he was transferred from the hospital to a rehab center. And we were talking via FaceTime, via Skype, and he turned the camera around and he showed me on the street, near the parking lot, where he's staying outside of the room in his hospital. There is a purple sign, and he said to me, "Can you see the sign? Can you see what it says? It's a message." I said, "I really can't see it. It wasn't clear. The phone was shaking a little bit." And he tried to zoom in. It didn't work. And I said, "Dad, what does the sign say?" It says hope on it. What an incredible message for someone who doesn't know, who's struggling with breathing, struggling with oxygen, or for the thousands and hundreds of thousands in the world who are struggling now, that there's hope, there's a future. Yesh tikva, yesh atid. There is a future for the world. There's a future for the children. There's a future for all of us. That's what we have to hold on to. If we want to defeat the evil that was perpetrated by the Nazis and our enemies in the world, we have to instill hope within our children, hope in tomorrow, hope in the future. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to see brighter days, days of beauty, days of congregating outside again, of bringing the world, the Jewish people together, Mirz Hashem, very soon.